Hi class, as discussed during our first 2 days of CAS 100, today you'll be required to read Chapter 2. After reading this chapter, you should be able to explain why a strong sense of ethical responsibility is vital for public speakers. You should be able to discuss the 5 guidelines for ethical speech making presented in the chapter. You should be able to define the differences of different types of plagiarism: global plagiarism, patchwork plagiarism, and incremental plagiarism, and explain why each type of plagiarism is unethical. You will also have an assignment due today, a plagiarism worksheet that relates to this information. And finally, you should be able to identify the 3 basic guidelines for ethical listening discussed in this chapter. All right, so let's get started with your first online lecture for our course. So, questions of ethics are central to the art of public speaking, and that's what I'll be discussing today from Chapter 2. Ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right and wrong in human affairs. So ethical issues arise when we ask whether a course of action is moral or immoral, fair or unfair, just or unjust, honest or dishonest. Basically, we're weighing potential courses of action against ethical standards. So questions of ethics come into play whenever a public speaker faces an audience, and you'll be dealing with these throughout our class. Just as there are guidelines for ethical behavior in other areas of life, so are there guidelines for ethical behavior in public speaking. Public speakers should make sure their goals are ethically sound. Public speakers should be fully prepared for each speech, probably one of the most important parts of public speaking in our class, and speakers should be honest in what they say. I'll talk about this a little more later, but public speakers should also avoid name calling and other forms of abusive language. And when we talk about persuasive speaking, we'll talk about certain fallacies that deal with this. And finally, public speakers should put ethical principles that you're learning in this chapter into practice. So more specifically, when it comes to name calling, this is using language to defame, demean, degrade individuals or groups. These are called ad hominem fallacies. So you want to think about it. You never want to attack the person. You always want to attack the issue. So now I just want to talk a little bit about plagiarism. Plagiarism is one of the most serious ethical lapses a public speaker can commit. What is plagiarism? It's presenting another person's language or ideas as one's own. This is a very serious offense. If I find out you've plagiarized information, you'll automatically get a 0. This will extremely hurt your grade. So you definitely want to avoid plagiarism. There are 3 types of plagiarism that I look for in the class. Global plagiarism is probably the worst, taking an entire speech from a single source and passing it off as one's own. On the other hand, patchwork plagiarism occurs when a speaker patches a speech together by copying verbatim from 2 or 3 sources. And finally, incremental plagiarism occurs when a speaker fails to give credit for specific parts, increments of your speech that are borrowed from other people. I probably see this, if I see anything, I see this the most. You simply forget to cite a source. Remember, I will accept APA or MLA when you're citing your sources. As long as you cite your sources, you'll be just fine. So, like I said earlier, just as one needs to credit the authors of print books and articles, so one needs to credit the authors of documents found online. So whatever you're using, if you're using internet materials, please take careful notes and remember where they're from. You need to cite your online sources as well as traditional sources. You'll probably be using internet sources more in this class than traditional books, magazines, etc. So you want to think about that when you're citing your internet materials. Who is the author and where is it from, the information from? You also want to know that part of your participation grade is the listening part. You will lose participation points if you're on your phone, if you're doing other work, if you're not paying attention and being an ethical listener. Speech making is a 2-way street, and listeners have a lot of ethical obligations. Again, this is part of your participation grade in this class. So some guidelines you want to think about: listeners should be courteous and attentive during the speech that's being made. Listeners should avoid prejudging the speaker. This will be really important during our persuasive speeches. You might hear topics you do not agree with. Do not prejudge the speaker just because you disagree with the topic. And listeners should maintain the free and open expression of ideas. So those are the basics of chapter 2. So now what I'd like you to do is two different things for our online class of today. I placed a video by Wayne LaPierre in the week 1 folder. Wayne LaPierre is the president of the NRA, and he gave this speech a week after the Sandy Hook shootings. I do this for a couple reasons. One, because as I had mentioned in our first couple weeks of class, I have a media background. Wayne LaPierre it does attack the media in this speech. So it's always a good speech for me to look at to not analyze the issue, analyze his ethical speaking. Remember, we are not a political class, so watching this speech is not an issue of gun control. It's about his ethical speaking. Guns. It's a polarizing topic. No matter what side you're on, it may be hard to listen because of your emotions. So try not to focus on the issue. Focus on how ethical the speaker is. Is he well prepared? Is he honest, respectful? What conflict could you see arising in this? And then you want to think about other things. Being an ethical speaker is just being able to distinguish facts from opinions. Does he have verifiable information? For example, in this speech, he says that a child sees 16,000 murders and 200,000 acts of violence in the media before he is 18 years old. According to who? I want to know where this information is from. Is there incomplete data? Are there more opinions than facts? Are there personal judgments? So this is what you want to think about when you are watching the video today. It'll help you analyze ethical speaking better. And then after that, don't forget to do your avoiding plagiarism worksheet. It's due today, Friday, the 13th of January by 4:25 p.m. Remember that we have class only online next week. So your week 2 folder will be up this Sunday. Any assignments for next week, including discussion questions, will all be due next Friday by 4:25. After that time, they're considered late. Late assignments are deducted 10% up to 4 days. So that is it for week 1. I hope you enjoyed our first week of class.